Hello and welcome. I'm Bonnie Libhart and you're watching Vision Plus here on Victory Network. And we're so happy that you joined us. We have exciting news of welcoming someone home that's been over the Persian Gulf. Now, I knew I might get choked up, but I didn't mean to do that early. And I'm just delighted to have not only the person we're welcoming home, Gerald Pennington Sr., but the most wonderful part is also he's brought his wife along, Pat Pennington, and also Dana, his daughter, and his son, Gerald Pennington Jr. I loved it when my son called and he said that his neighbor came over and said, I'm home, and so we're just so excited, and we wanted to say welcome home to the Pennington family. We're delighted that you're here.
Thank you very much.
Now, Gerald is with the Corps of Engineers, and he is a cost estimator. We'll find out what that is. And also, Pat works at NASA also. Pat is working currently with a tethered satellite system, and I haven't heard of that, so she's going to have to tell us what it is. Dana goes to college and also teaches swimming at the natatorium, works there, and Gerald Pennington Jr. has the card shop, the baseball card shop on Whitesburg that I'm sure that some of you know about, one block past Lily Flag next to Gibson's Barbecue. Welcome to Victory Network and Channel 58.
Thank you very much.
And this man, it's not the first time he was in Saudi Arabia. You were actually there.
From 79 to 84. I went over with the Middle East Division. That was my first trip over, and this was my second trip.
Did you do like some of the other guys, kiss the American soil almost?
I'll tell you, when I got to Dover Air Force Base, that was the beautifulest thing I ever seen. It was great. There were 6 of us that came back on the plane together, and when we went into Dover, you know, that was one of the, we didn't know whether to eat breakfast, lunch, or supper, so we just went in and got a hamburger and hot dogs and sit down and eat breakfast.
Some American food like hamburger and hot dog.
It was very different.
Did you know, Pat, that he was coming home this soon?
Yes, the Middle East Division was in contact with me quite frequently every other day when they could, and they were keeping me up to date on when he would be home. And for a while, his due date out was canceled for a little bit, and then it was
That
put
was
back
not
on.
a happy day, I'm sure.
Yeah, but we knew that it was in support of the troops and what needed to be done. So for him to stay a few more days, that was okay. But they let me know when he was coming home.
While you're talking, just tell us what the satellite, tethered satellite system is at NASA.
It involves experiments that will be flown on the shuttle in 1992, and it will go out and the tether will go out and be able to look at areas that haven't been able to be seen. It will go out supposedly like a tether, like on a rope, to be able to see areas that haven't been able to be seen before.
That's exciting to hear about that. We need to do another program someday just to learn more about that. Dana, I know you were excited when your dad was coming home. Tell me how you felt when you saw him walk through the door.
It was like him coming home. I mean, you know, Daddy coming home and everything's going to be all right. But we knew what he was doing was fine, and if we could, we would have went over there with him. I mean, he was as safe as if he was here, so we weren't worried that much, you know. So.
In your mind, anyway. How about you, Gerald?
In my mind, was Daddy safe? Oh, yeah. He, being, I guess, an ex-Marine Corps, ducking those scuds all the time. The only problem we worried about was when he was sleeping at nighttime, whether he would wake up or not. But he took a good care of himself.
Well, tell me what a cost estimator is.
Well, you know, we went over there with a mission to do, and first of all, we had to, since there were several people involved in helping the U.S. government out as far as paying for the different projects that was in support of Desert Shield and Desert Storm, I had to work up a cost estimate as far as the different construction fast-track programs. And that was one of the first things that I did when I went over in November, is that because of the experience that I had in the Middle East Division, right after the operation started,
Operation Desert Shield.
Yes, ma'am. The Middle East Division called me in early October, and they told me to get my stuff together, and so just in case they didn't know exactly what date I was going to be deployed, but they wanted me to go over and help work on some of the cost estimates for some of the projects they were about ready to build.
Now, you were involved with training a Saudi Arabian that you happened to see again in the early 80s.
Right.
And you got back over there, and tell us about that experience.
Well, there was a young lieutenant in 1980 when the Corps of Engineers went over to help the Saudis build some of their programs. There was a Lieutenant Saad. At that time, Saad was just a young lieutenant from the Saudi government. And part of our program was to train the Saudis in the manner and how the Corps of Engineers operate as far as construction. So Saad came out to the residence site, and he stayed on the site with me for about 2 years. And now this trip over, I ran into Saad. I was very shocked when I saw him, because when I had left, he was a young lieutenant, and now he was an old captain like myself, and he was supposed to get his major. And so I spent 2 days up north with Saad, and I was very happy. Saad had 3 children, and we talked about the family, and that I hope in the future that Saad and I can get back together. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping that I'll get another trip back over this sometime this year if the Corps will approve.
Now, that happens that the Corps of Engineers trains a lot of people in different parts of the country.
That's correct.
Of the world, in fact. And
Right.
I believe the Bevel Center here in Huntsville in the Tennessee Valley area is used a lot of times for that
Right.
purposes
They
too.
train a lot of different nationality.
Now, there were Americans living there, because I know that when we were over in Amman, Jordan, that there were Americans living there and had lived there for maybe a couple decades almost. What did they think? Did they think we would really go to war? What were their feelings?
Some of the Americans that lived in some of the older compounds who had been over there for years really didn't think we were going to war. And they got up to the last minute until the war had already started before a lot of Americans would even leave Kingdom. And they were very shocked. Some of the older Americans, they never did think the war was going to start.
Were you afraid? I know you came home with an actual shrapnel from, what was it?
A Scud missile.
The Scud
I brought my
missile.
son back a piece of one Scud that landed, and when I got ready to leave over there, I was able to bring my daughter and my wife back something, but what do you bring a son? So I asked one of the Air Force officers if I could have a piece of the Scud missile. So they gave me a piece of Scud, so I brought my son.
So if 500,000 troops come back with a part of the Scud,
Part of the
hey,
Scud,
we'll
hey.
clean up the whole desert.
That's one thing. I wished I could have brought back a Patriot. I'll tell you, that was one of the
That's
nicest
exciting.
things. That was exciting.
You know, this war, I was not for us fighting, before it ever started. Then I admit that I was so, apprehensive, because my remembrance was things like, I just saw this article about when we were in Iwo Jima for 45 days. And there at Iwo Jima, when the Japanese, one of the generals, had 21,000 men under his command, and during the battle 19,000 Americans were wounded, 7,000 Americans were killed, and only 216 of the 21,000 Japanese remained alive. And he goes on to say that he watched the burial with bulldozers, 1,600 American bodies. It was an awful sight indeed. So with thoughts of this and also what happened in Vietnam, we did not want that to happen. So we're so happy that though 79 families are affected, that at least that's not many compared to these thousands and thousands of young men that we lost in that war, the previous wars, even going back to the Civil War. Why do you think that's so different this time? Why was it over quickly and relatively few were lost of the Allied forces?
Because the young U.S. troops were ready.
They were ready.
They were ready, and they fought with their hearts. I left some my last trip over there, I left some of the 82nd Airborne up north, and I was fortunate to have went through, we were doing a project for some of them, and they were ready. And I haven't had a chance, there's a couple of young troops that I haven't heard from, but There's one that Captain Vickers, who was he was out of the 82nd, and before he was deployed up north, he used to come over to the house a lot and wash his clothes.
Now, this is when you were there in the 80s, or?
No, this is when we're here now.
Oh,
this
okay.
trip now.
Because I wondered, I wanted to hear about your food and electricity, and I hope we get...
This trip was the we went over initially we built showers and latrines for some of the troops that were deployed up north and around Kingdom, and some of the troops the villa that I was staying in, we had a washer and dryer and everything, so Captain Vickers came over, did all his laundry, and one day one of the people in the compound came around wanting to know why our water was flowing all the time. And so what we had done, we had looked after a lot of the military. They had come over when they couldn't get their clothes washed and dried. They came into the compound, and we shared our villa with them.
That's wonderful, because I know some of the guys that are coming back on the plane today said they want to get in the shower. That's the important thing that they... What about your food? Now, how did you get your food and your electricity and those kinds of things?
Well, the Corps had a compound set up for us where we worked and eat and sleep, and they had like most mess halls, they brought in a catered breakfast, and we had MREs for lunch, and then we had an evening meal brought in. But the way we worked, it was like we went around loading up on oranges and apples and bananas and taking an MRE, because some days you'd go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and you may not get off until the next morning, depending on the urgency. And I have gone to work like 9 o'clock at night and finished a project and then worked all night and then come back the next morning. So, lunch, breakfast, and supper was dependent on your schedule.
Whether you got it or not.
Whether you got it or not.
How did the news that you were getting over there in Saudi Arabia compare with what Pat was getting here at home?
We really never did have time to watch very much news. We had a CNN piped into the compound, but we really didn't have time to watch it, because by the time I would get home, some nights I'd go home and some of the guys in the compound used to call me about crashing and assuming my position. I used to get on the couch and fall asleep, and then we wake up the next morning and go back to work. So you kind of looked at the news in some respects. You didn't really want to watch it that much.
How about you, Pat? How did you feel about the news you were getting? Did you feel that it was accurate, or all the time it says this has been approved by...
Well, I think it should have been approved. My feeling is that a lot of time that the news network shouldn't be putting out a lot that they are putting out. We didn't want to give positions away. We didn't want to tell just exactly when we were going in, where we were going in. I think that for the benefit of our troops, our civilian employees that were over there, plus people that were living there, and the locals, that a lot of things just didn't need to be put out. And I agreed with it being monitored and censored, if that's the word we want to use, censored.
How about now? Do you think that it should be totally open now and we could talk about anything?
I'm sure, no, I don't. My feeling is that we pray that this is over with, and we pray that we don't ever have to do it again. But I think there are some secrets that our government should keep from us. Everyone doesn't need to know everything. And maybe we're better off by not knowing everything.
What secrets are there that we think the government should?
Well, if you've ever
I don't think
if you've ever lived in the desert.
I haven't lived there, but I've been there.
Okay, we lived there a little over 6.5 years. And if you've been there and they had a location, you would know. I could tell you within 100 miles, within an area of where it's at, and all you have to do is look at it, because.
So if too much information about whether they were going north or east or how far past a certain city, you would just know the location, so you could be prepared.
So when I would talk to Pat, I'd say, Pat, I'm going north, and she didn't ask me anything more.
And having lived there before, a lot of the key words that he was using, I usually knew into what areas he was going in, except some things he did keep secret, and I didn't know until he got home, that he had actually been into some areas that he had been into.
Now, Pat, go ahead. I thought you were going to... Well, Dana, you and Gerald were there in Saudi Arabia for several years. How did you feel when you would watch this news?
Well, some of the stuff they would show, it's like some of the, the Navy bases and stuff. We knew where they were, and we were excited because we had been there. Some of the ports and stuff off the coast. We were there, and we knew where they would say somewhere in Saudi, and we knew where it was. And I have a friend who was over there too, and she knew. We would talk on the phone and say, "Hey, we know where they are," And I mean, we knew where they were, so but it's glad that nobody else knew where they were,
Now, you're Methodist, and I know that as you go over to Saudi Arabia, we're told that the guys were not allowed to sing Christmas carols, and they had to hide their Bibles. How's that work? Did the Americans still go ahead and read and worship at Christmas time and have their carols, but they just kind of... What was your experience during that time?
Well, you kept a low profile as such. The Saudis let us have services within our compounds when we lived there. You had your Bibles and the Catholics with their crosses and their crucifix and such. They just didn't want us to go out and preach amongst their people.
Yes.
And as long as we were there, we were guests of their country, so we had to respect their customs and such by being there. And as long as we did it within our own people, it was allowed.
What about the local nationals that you were with? Did you have friends that became, people that became your friends?
Yes, we did. Not only the local nationalists, but the government community that we lived with. It was amazing that when Jerry went to Saudi this time, the phone calls, long-distance phone calls and such, of support of our friends that had been in Saudi with us at the time, that called and offered us support the whole time that he was gone. And that was good. But when you live in a situation that we did when we were over there, your friends become your family, because you don't have all your family with you. And so your friends become family. And then we went out and broadened out, made friends within the local community with the Saudis and other nationalities. And this is where our friend Saud that Gerald was just talking about became a good friend. And by doing this, we were able to see a lot of their country.
How were they in training them, since the customs are so different? What was it easy to communicate what you were wanting to accomplish through the training?
Most of the young officers had went to school here in the United States. Now, Captain Saud went to the University of Washington, and the Saudis had sent him to school, and he had completed his education. He had I think he had a master's in engineering planning, and Saud took over one of the larger projects that the Corps of Engineers, had completed to operate in the operation and maintenance of the city. And so it was a good experience. The Saudis were well trained, and I was very happy with them. And although sometimes it's people don't understand how the customs are, you just have to understand that Saudi Arabia is a place where they are the home of the Muslim religion. It's the holy place for Mecca, and that this was. When I went in Kingdom this time, out of all places, I would have never thought there would have been a war in Saudi Arabia. And the same thing with Kuwait. We went through Kuwait one time when we were going on leave. And to take a small place like that and all of a sudden turn it into a place that is like it is now, it makes you sad for those people. That is one of the things that I volunteered to go back to Kuwait and help them out. And
are you talking about now in the future?
Now,
So you do. I was going to ask if you
to go.
wanted to go
Yeah, I have
back.
volunteered to go back and help them out. And because I have, you got old friends. And like Saud says, now is a time for old friends, and you need to help them out.
What was the destruction like that you observed?
I left the 19th before the ground war started. And I didn't get a chance to see anything. But
When they
was-
were using the Scud missiles, and of course the Patriots were keeping those away most of the time, did any of them come close to where your compound was?
not before I left, but I was very sad when that Scud hit that other barracks and killed those troops, because that particular one was near where we stayed at.
Sometimes we forget that the people of all countries are just people with wives and children like we are. And it was a real dream and that this will one day not have to be the way we settle disputes, is going to war. And it's just really confirms in my mind how important it is for us to have a basis of understanding among peoples.
Thank God the chaplain was there. The chaplain used to come in and have breakfast with us every day. And he was close to there, so he was able to go to the site. The only thing I heard was, I really haven't heard very much about it, and that the chaplain did get to go there because it was near there. So I'm glad the chaplain was there.
Because I understand a lot of the troops really were reading their Bible and turning to the Lord, and that was when you made that decision, you know, what is important to me.
Well, every night you made sure you said your prayers, because you didn't know whether you were going to get hit by a Scud that night or not. Because it was one of these funny things where we went home in the daytime and said, hey, let's take a Scud nap.
That's good now.
And what we did in the compound is everybody sort of just looked after each other. And the military came in, we had everything set up, you know, an alarm system, so they could wake everybody up in the compound. So if you needed to put on your gas mask, you could. And one night, the guys in the compound, after we had one of the long Scud attacks, I have got to the point where I just fell asleep in the gas mask and they forgot to wake me up. And it
You
was
actually had the gas mask.
Yeah, and so the next morning they says, well, how do you sleep in a gas mask? I says, it goes poof, poof, poof. So it was just one of those things.
When you're tired enough, you can sleep in a gas mask.
When you're tired enough, you can sleep anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure some of those
Probably
young
a
boys,
lot of them doing that.
some of those young boys did.
Did you think that, how did you feel about how they were designed? I know a couple of the people, I guess they were women and children that didn't know how to remove something, and they died, of course, by putting it on. So do you think could have been designed differently?
We had an operational officer, Major Brooks, out of the Middle East Division, and he trained us.
How to,
real
probably
well.
was untrained people putting them on.
The military trained us like, we started off like staying in them maybe an hour a day.
Was it give you kind of claustrophobia to be there?
No, not that much. The longer you stay in it, the more relaxed you are. And then he stepped it up to next week. The closer and closer we got to what we call K-Day, that's the day of the initial, we stayed in it the longest, where we'd stay in it, keep the mask on for 2 hours and then 3 hours, and we were well trained, because we would go through this whole drill of putting on your mop suit, putting on your gas mask, so it really got to the point of where you could actually put on a gas mask in 9 seconds.
9 seconds, okay. What about what you think is when the troops come back, how do you think we should welcome them home? We want you to feel welcome, and we're happy that you were a volunteer to go.
Well out for those young boys.
What are some of the things we can do?
Just take it easy on them and welcome them home, because there's going to be a lot of them. This was their first time over there. They left the country. Some of them just got out of AIT. They did an excellent job over there up north, and now they're going to come home, and they're going to need somebody, a lot of support. So just don't cut them off and tell them, hey, you were gone for a while, you got to catch up on your work. You know, just be a little patient with them and take care of them.
I understand that a lot of them have a totally new philosophy and attitude about life since they've seen death so close to them. And how can we be nice to them? What do you mean exactly?
Well, as far as being nice to them, tell them thank you for the good job they did. Now, when I came home, there was one of the airlines that I was, well, they welcomed me real good. From the time I got on that airplane to the time I got off, they treated me excellent. Delta Airlines they treated me great. And I think that was one of the greatest things that they did. They welcomed me on the plane, and when I got off, they welcomed me back. Even from the secretary, from one of the stewardess to the man who checked in, they told me, welcome home. So every one of them you see, just tell them, welcome home. And that's it.
But, well, they're to have their jobs back, of course, and they're to have either the same job or a better position. And so that, I'm sure, will happen, because that's not only a law, but I'm sure the employers want to do that if they're in a regular job. And, of course, if they're just, a lot of them were reservists that will have regular jobs, doctors, and how do all of you feel about the troops coming home? What do you think you can do to make them feel welcome, so that we don't have another Vietnam veterans syndrome where they feel like they're embarrassed that they fought, and that was really so sad. We never want that to happen again. What are some ideas that you would have?
Well, I think as far as the media goes, I think the media is doing good about welcoming the troops, and the ones that are going to have a big group coming home this weekend, I understand, or today or tomorrow, which I think is great. Each of their cities that they going into should also, maybe by the news media, the TV media, should welcome them home. From the feeling that I got from the troops that were giving interviews on the TV, they supported this, and I think this is the first time in a long time that we have gotten support from them everyone agreeing that this is what we needed to do. And they didn't only do it for praise, they did it because we wanted to do this. We needed to do this. We needed to get this over and done with, and they supported Bush.
Strong message to all dictator-type tyrants around the world that we're not going to stand for this.
And I think basically the troops had the faith that we were going to get this over with and done, go home and go along with our lives and continue on.
Now, you said you're volunteering to go back to
Kuwait.
To Kuwait
I
and help them.
volunteered to go back.
Now, will you go as part of the Corps of Engineers?
I'll go with the Corps of Engineers.
And what all will they be doing to rebuild Kuwait?
Some of the things will be getting the water systems back, the power plants, getting the most of the commercial buildings back, and helping some of the maybe some of the families get their houses back, and that kind of stuff. But first, get the basic necessities of life. Right now, water, sewer, power, some of the things that the individual will need right now.
What are they doing at this point without those base necessities?
Well, they're probably doing like we did. They're drinking a lot of bottled water, and it's hard to say exactly what they're doing right now, because not knowing and being this far away, it's very hard. And watching some of the news, they are having a rough time. The Kuwaitis are having a rough time, and I just feel so sad for them. And I wish we could do more for them.
Your personal opinion, what do you think should happen to Saddam Hussein?
I don't want to comment on that.
Okay.
I have a different opinion on that, and that's...
Everybody has their own opinion. Gerald Jr., how about you? Had the war continued, would you have been one that would wanted to volunteer if the draft didn't come about?
That's a hard question to ask. I don't know. That's a hard question. If the draft came along and my number was drawn, yes, I will go. Volunteering, I will probably have to make that decision if it came. With my business now, and I've had it for about a year. I probably have to continue it, that type of thing.
Plus I was over there, and it would have been hard. He was going to look after the family. When I left, I asked my son to watch over the family.
Put him in charge.
I knew he was. That's why it would have been difficult for him, because I knew that one of us was over there.
It's been rough.
And
it was rough.
It's been rough.
When you say it's been rough, how do you mean, Gerald?
Well, you know, you got to take old Dad's position, being the head of the family. You know.
Holidays were the worst.
You know.
We're a close family, and having to go through Thanksgiving and Christmas separated, that was the worst. But we made it with friends and family and supporters. We made it. And I think this is what the troops need, friends and family and support. Anyone who wants to, if a person wants to talk that's been over there, let them talk. Support them that way. Sit and listen to them.
And again, we welcome back the Pennington family, Gerald Pennington Sr. and his wife Pat is so happy he's home, and his daughter Dana, and also his son Gerald Pennington Jr. We also want to thank Ken Crawford for our Corps of Engineers for being with us, Public Affairs Director, whatever his position is. If I said it wrong, he can tell me later and get me into trouble. So, okay, we're glad.
The voices raised.